everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe. I absolutely think this cover is beautiful. It's the Barnes & Noble's exclusive cover. They do exclusive covers for like every edition of Lore, and this has obviously been out for quite some time. I think it was first published in 2021. It's based on a webtoon, which I had actually not heard of previously to getting this book. The funny story about this, let me tell you, lean in. My friend actually bought this for me as a Christmas present 2 years ago now, and I hadn't heard of it, but she was like, I really think you'll like it. She was reading the webtoon, and for whatever reason, I guess that was maybe the start of my book slump. I just never got around to reading it. But recently I really made a conscious effort to try and read more books, specifically read more books that I own so I can get through more of my TBR pile before it consumes my house. So this was one that I was really looking forward to starting, just because when you're in kind of a reading slump, graphic novels are always like the way to go. I feel like they tend to be very fast paced. The art really draws you in, so I was definitely thinking of picking this one up, and my friend was absolutely right. I should have read this 2 years ago. I was kicking myself for not starting it sooner, and as soon as I finished it, I ran out and bought all the other volumes that are currently out, and this will be a true test to see if she watches my videos or not, because she can hold this over me forever that she knew this book I would love, and I put off reading it for so long. Again, not really resisting it, just being like, yeah, I don't really feel like reading, but I love it. So if you haven't heard of Lore Olympus, it is a modern kind of take on the Olympians and Olympus specifically. There are like versions of like the human world that they sometimes visit in later books, but those are set in like ancient time, and then the modern time is where the Olympians live. The main story is the relationship between Persephone and Hades, which is a relationship I absolutely love. I do think there are so many Hades and Persephone retellings, novels these days that it can get a bit repetitive, but I haven't read too many of them that I think it's kind of, you know, boring at this point. And I also feel like this one does a very good job of telling it. Like I said, I have always been interested in Persephone. I just think the reworking of her whole myth, it kind of happened around the time that like I was in high school when I like had to research her. I feel like that was kind of discovering all these things about how originally she was just viewed as this poor victim who was kidnapped, taken down to the underworld, and Hades made her his bride for 6 months of the year against her will, and like she always wanted to get back up to like the real, like the earth, to be with her mother in the sun and all that. But then there was kind of this reworking, this re-looking at the myth of like maybe Persephone doesn't necessarily hate the underworld as much as people think she is, and Hades isn't as a bad guy as people think he is. And there was even a further reworking to be like, hey, maybe she wanted to get away from Demeter, maybe like she needed a reason, and this was her way to get out of it, and you know, she ended up falling in love with Hades. So there's all different ways to look at it, which is always interesting about myths, is that like they can be reworked and reframed based on how society views them currently. So I feel like Persephone is definitely a rework, and we're kind of getting that, I feel like, with Medusa now too, is who's going through like this no longer a villain but a victim kind of view that everyone's taking on her, and it's just really cool to see how that can change, and the perspective of something that's technically the same can shift based on changing perspectives in society. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, getting to this, the interesting thing about this too is, for all the Greek myth retellings and things that I've watched, I don't actually think I've ever seen Hades be portrayed as the good guy. I feel like you could argue in Percy Jackson that he has his moments and he's not like definitely the worst out of that. I feel like he's pretty level with a lot of the other Greek parents that we see in those books, but this one he's like for real like a good guy. He's socially awkward. He has got his siblings Zeus and Poseidon, and they actually have a pretty good relationship in the series. Like they hang out on the regular, and he's just kind of the odd man out like Hades always kind of is, but in this case it's because, you know, he lives in the underworld, he's away from Olympus, his brothers are married, Poseidon is in an open relationship with his wife and is very happy. Zeus is obviously married to Hera, and there's a whole storyline with that I am really interested to dig more into. And the really cool thing is, in the back when they question like, hey, why did you choose to write about Persephone and Hades, the author talked about how like compared to Poseidon and especially Zeus, Hades is actually like one of the better, more loyal people in terms of like, you know, not really cheating on Persephone, whereas Zeus cheats on anything that moves, really, and Poseidon has his kind of dalliances, which again, they're in an open relationship in this one, but in other iterations, there's definitely cheating and stuff going on, whereas like Hades is very loyal, and I feel like people don't really talk about that, but even like it reminded me of Percy Jackson, where they made that treaty, the three of them, to not have any more children after the war had happened, and Hades was the only one that technically didn't break that treaty, even though he's supposedly the bad one. So this first volume focuses on Persephone's arrival in Olympus. She's been raised in the mortal world with her mother for like years and years and years, and this is her first foray, and her mother is, we see and hear, kind of very controlling. She's very like worried about Persephone, and it's like Persephone's all her love and her adoration, but in doing that, she's very strict about who Persephone can hang out with, what Persephone can do, and it's very stifling, and you can just feel like how this is all kind of new for Persephone, but she's also just kind of still scared that any mess up and her mom will call her back to the mortal world. So at the beginning of the novel, Hades does something that we know you should never ever do, and that is that he sees Persephone at a party and he says that she looks better than Aphrodite. Aphrodite hears this, of course, because of course she does, and like a lot of them are wont to do, instead of blaming the person who actually said the thing, she decides to pull a prank using Persephone, and they get Persephone to go hide in Hades' car. He drives her to the underworld, and they think like, oh my gosh, like she's gonna be drunk and embarrass herself, and he's gonna be rude and scare her off. And instead, he takes care of her, and she's really charming and sweet and different and not afraid of him like a lot of people are in Olympus, and they kind of have this really cool connection from the beginning. I love the dialogue between Persephone and Hades. I think their romantic relationship, I mean, this is kind of like a friendship mostly in this first volume, but the flirtatiousness is definitely still there, and just the charisma between them is very, very obvious, and that's what I'm excited to see developed more. The whole conflict is more just like what you would expect of like everyone else being like, yo, like Hades isn't good, like you're very innocent and pure and naive, and like we have to protect you from him. But we're also looking at, I mean, not to quote Percy Jackson again, but like what we just heard in the series, not all monsters that look like monsters are, and not all heroes that look like heroes are. So we get this specifically with Apollo. Now, I don't want to go too much into it because it is like spoiler territory, and it's also like a sensitive topic, but Apollo was like branded as like this hero of Olympus, like the mortals love him, he's so popular in the ranks and stuff like that, and he takes this really like obsessive interest in Persephone, who is staying as a roommate of Apollo's sister Artemis, so he's kind of always around, and it just is very uncomfortable where you can see like Persephone is not into him at all, and like finds his like very unwanted and aggressive advances like very off-putting. So that all culminates in like the big part of this novel and what is going to like lead into the other volumes, and what I'm most interested to see resolve, because again, it's kind of that thing of like Hades has been nothing but sweet and caring and kind to her, and everyone's telling her you can't trust that, you can't believe that, like he'll just use you and play with you, and like you're nothing to him. Whereas Apollo, who has used her and been abusive to her and assaulted her, people are all like trying to convince her like he's a good guy, you just have to give him a chance, like not knowing that he assaulted her, but he's just always around, and it's just very well done, that dynamic between like who quote unquote is the bad guy and who looks like the bad guy and fits the guy the bad role, versus who fits the guy of the good guy and like looks like everything you should and everyone hypes him up and stuff like that, but he's actually not the good guy. I think that dynamic is very well done and shown very, very well, and that's something I'm interested to see developed, because we do see Hera at the time of the assault like get some kind of, I don't know if it's a vision necessarily, I'm not sure what exactly she's the goddess of. Like I know she's a goddess of family or marriage, I think, which is why like she never cheats, but I don't know like how, and I wanted to explain more like how she's able to sense what's happening to Persephone as it's happening, but Hera is made aware not of who it is happening to, but of what exactly is happening, that there's like some pain, tremendous pain out there in the world. And that whole thing is really well drawn because they use music notes, which Apollo is obviously known for being like a patron of the music arts and stuff like that, and they kind of make it so now they're like broken, but at the same time the music notes are almost like that charm that he has on you, right? Of like it sounds all good, but it's broken, it's distorted, it's not actually making you happy or like a pleasant feeling. So I'm interested to see that, because right now there's like not a lot of people on Hades' side, and Persephone is like saying, oh, I don't like him, like I just like him as a friend. But I feel like in terms of like who her mom is, everyone else is trying to protect her, right? And be like, oh, like we don't want you to get taken advantage of, like you don't know how this is. And there are people that want to mess with her, and there's people that want to mess with her specifically to get with Hades, as we saw. But their chemistry is so electric, and I cannot wait to see that develop more. And Hades is just funny. Like I like that Persephone as a character she's very dynamic. She like will be like more like flirtatious with Hades because she obviously feels comfortable with him, whereas she's very unsure of herself in a lot of other aspects because she doesn't know this world. And again, she's kind of always worried one mess up and her mom will yank her out of it. But I feel like Hades himself is also very funny, and I just love that. I love when like you make like the brooding guy that everyone is quote unquote scared of, and like he's dark, and you know, like everyone's like he just don't like mess with him, and he's just like full of jokes and is so fun, but no one's taken the time to really get to know him. And it's just really fun to see that whole dynamic of like she's not afraid of him, and even though she knows like who he is, what he represents, like that's not scaring her off, and like she does like him, wants to be his friend at least, but likes him, and it's just so adorable, and I can't wait to see it develop. It's really hard for me to not like look up the webtoon and just read completely to like what it's caught up to now, but I'm trying to be good and stick to the volumes and make this last longer than like staying up all night and like getting through all of them. I'm trying. I don't know if it's gonna stay forever, but I'm really trying. My favorite character this volume, aside from Persephone and Hades, because I think they're so funny, is actually Hera. I really love the take on Hera. I feel like that's another thing that I like about these characters, is it's a take I don't often see on them. So Hera, I feel like usually is a very jealous, like scorned wife because Zeus is cheating on her so much. But when you really peel that back, or not even peel it back, just start to think about it for 2 seconds, like why is it that we're always portraying her as like this mean person when she's getting a complete short end of a stick? Her husband's cheating on her with everything that moves, and I feel like Hera is a much more empathetic person in this. Like you see where it's like she is who she is without Zeus, and it's like how being with Zeus, how that's kind of taken her identity away, and how she's struggling to keep that and keep who she is while still, you know, being the wife of this powerful person. So I just really like seeing her take, because she wasn't unkind to be unkind. Like she's strong and you don't want to mess with her, but she's very sweet and she's very caring, and I think we're going to see that develop more, especially with Persephone after seeing like her being affected by, and again not knowing that it was, but her being affected by what happened to Persephone and having that kind of connection. I don't think she's going to let that go easily, and she's going to want to try and figure it out, because it was so painful for her to experience that, her knowing like someone out there has actually experienced it, like she's going to want to find out. So I like that. I like again that the brothers actually for the most part get along. Like they have their trifes, and there's definitely like undertones of like bigger conflicts that they're kind of sweeping, and like, you know, when you're just like, we're not gonna talk about this because we'll have a big fight, so like let's just everyone get along and not talk about that. But that'll be stuff that obviously develops in the other volumes, and I'm just so excited to see it. So yeah, if you have read volume 1 or any of the volumes of Lore Olympus, let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments, like what you think of the whole relationship dynamic, and also just like the characters being different. Like I said, like I'm more excited obviously to see the relationship develop, but I think just to get to see other characters, you know, like see different iterations of them than what I'm used to, and also see maybe ones that I haven't seen as much, since this is like a more mature take on them than like Percy Jackson was, obviously. But I feel like Percy Jackson is the majority of like the Greek myths that I know, and that's how I know them from. So this can be a more mature take, and I'm just excited to see what else is going to be there. So yeah, if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to my channel down below to be told when I make more videos and updates on the other volumes in the Lore Olympus, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!